Greetings all. I hope that you guys are good. So let's have a quick look at Volatility 75. Yeah, so you guys can see that in front of me I have the monthly chart open. And in my previous video I actually spoke about how we may be having an information actually taking place, or forming rather. And I said that when it comes to informations, what normally happens is a lot of people would sell on the second leg of the M structure. And I also mentioned that this information actually um, hasn't broken its neckline as yet. And for that reason, at this point in time, me personally, I don't take it that seriously. And that is also because we have a strong area of support at this range. As you can see, that we had a bounce here, another bounce there, a third bounce there, and most recently we had another bounce there, which was formed by the July candle. Nonetheless, let's continue. But as I say, guys, we might see in the future price actually breaking through the neckline. And should that happen, what we would be looking for is for price to head back to the neckline, to retest it, and possibly push further down. In which case, we would look for selling opportunities at this point. And our first take profit, based on this monthly chart, should be around here somewhere, because this is a very strong area of support, right? Nonetheless, that's still very much far off, because we're looking at the monthly chart now, and this particular formation may take months, if not years, to actually form. Anyway, from here, what I'm gonna do is head down to the weekly chart. Just bear with me. Let's see. Weekly chart. There we go. So what do we see on the weekly chart that is interesting or significant? What do we see on this chart that is interesting or significant? Let's have a look at last week's um, let's have a look at last week's candle. It closed as a strong bullish candle, I think, right? And what may happen next is that we might see price pushing to at least this level over here. You might see price pushing to this level over here, because it is a strong level of resistance, and from there we may be looking for possible selling opportunities. And that is also because currently the market is in a downtrend. And as you can see, guys, we had a high over there, and then we had a low over here, and then we had a lower high over there, and then we had a lower low over here, right? So that confirms to us that we are indeed in a downtrend. Anyway, let's proceed. So what else do we see on this chart that is interesting? Another thing that is interesting, which I also raised in my previous video, is the fact that we have this candlestick over here. It is a liquidity candlestick, and that tells us that in the future price has to head to that level to grab that liquidity. And as you know, guys, that liquidity represents money, and we know that the market will always go to where the money is located. Anyway, let's proceed. So what else do we see on this chart? Another thing that I see on this chart is the fact that we have a head and shoulders pattern in this region, and the neckline is somewhere in this region, right? And it seems as though, okay, let me just redraw that. It seems as though that price actually has closed below the neckline, which means that we should indeed be looking for selling opportunities. We just need to wait for price to go back to the neckline to retest it and look for selling opportunities at that level, right? So what I'm going to do now is, number one, I'm going to mark that liquidity candlestick at the top, because it's also very important. There we go. That's number one. There we go. Just bear with me, guys. There we go. Number two, I'm going to I'm going to draw the neckline of that head and shoulders pattern. Just bear with me. And just to reiterate, remember that necklines are not an actual line, but they are rather an area. So something like this would be the neckline. Something like this would be the neckline. Something like this would be the neckline. There we go. Right. As I said, guys, that um, the neckline has been broken to the bottom, and what we expect to see next is for price to head back to the neckline to retest it, and that's where we would look for further selling opportunities. And our first take profit, just based on the weekly chart, should be around here, because we have a very strong area of support at that point, you know, based on these two touches there. Anyway, let's continue. Let's see. So from here, what I'm gonna do is head down to the daily chart, seeing that there's not really much of interest here on this particular chart. Let's see, let me head down to the daily chart. Okay, so here we are on the daily chart. Here we are on the daily chart. So over and above that huge head and shoulders pattern that we spoke about on the higher time frames, we also have in this region an M formation. Can you guys see that? And the neckline is there. So can you guys see that the neckline has been broken, and price is now heading back to the neckline to retest it? So this is also confluence in that we have, number one, this huge head and shoulders pattern which has a neckline there. Number two, we have this M formation which also has a neckline in more or less the same area. So this is confluence, and it says to us that indeed, should price get to this point, we should be looking for further selling opportunities, right? So let's continue. So what I'm going to do now is just to add a neckline to this smaller M structure, because it's also very much important, and I just hope that my lines are not confusing. Nonetheless, let's proceed. So what else do we see here? In fact, before we continue, what I'm going to do actually is just add um, my daily channel. Just bear with me. I just need to ensure that it is as accurate as can be. There we go. There goes our daily channel, right? So what else do we see on this chart that is interesting or significant? So we can see here that we also have a very strong area of resistance, and over and above that, we can see that as much as we have this M formation, we also have what seems to be a W formation developing here, right? With the second leg being over there of the W structure. And I said to you guys that when it comes to W structures, just like with M structures, a lot of people buy on the second leg of the W, right? So just bear with me. So indeed, we have a lot of people who have bought in that region, and we can also see that the neckline has actually been broken, which means that more buyers came into the fray at that point, which tells us that just below this W structure, there's a whole lot of money there, just below this W structure, and that money is in the form of stop losses. And that also tells us that in the future, we will see price coming back to the bottom of that W structure, and that is because there are stop losses there. Anyway, let's continue. So what else do we see? So over and above us having that W structure, I see that we also have a liquidity candlestick over here, and this confirms that, yeah, yes, indeed, the market must come to that level to grab that liquidity. So I'm just gonna mark that point as well, because it's also very important. Just bear with me. Let's see. There we go. There goes our liquidity area. So what I'm going to do now is head down to the 4-hour chart, and on the 4-hour chart we will take a closer look at this area over here, because I believe it'll be better visible on the 4-hour chart. So let's go. And here we are on the H4 chart. Here we are on the H4 chart. And I did say that this area would be better visible on the H4 chart, right? So let's proceed. So I mentioned that we have a W structure over there, and that a lot of traders and investors bought at that point, putting their stop losses just below. And I also mentioned that the neckline over here, has actually been broken, and a lot of buyers came into the fray again at this point, right? Um, so let's proceed from here. So the next thing that I'm going to do from this point is actually, sorry, just bear with me. So the next thing we're going to do from this point is actually add our H4 channel as well. So let's add that. Let's see. In fact, I'm just going to add a trend line. I'll add it this way. Just bear with me. There we go. So what's actually happening right now is that we can see that the market on the H4 chart is no longer in a downtrend, right? Because we had, let me just draw it, because we had, let's see, yeah, so we had a low here, and then we had a high there, and then we had a higher low here, and then we had a higher high there. So that confirms that we are no longer in a downtrend and that we are in an uptrend. However, guys, as much as we're now in an uptrend, we need to keep in the back of our minds the fact that we have that huge M structure over here, which has a neckline over there, as well as that huge head and shoulders pattern that I spoke about on the bigger charts, right? And I mentioned that should price get to this point over here, we should be looking for possible selling opportunities, right? That's number one. Another thing that is also very important is the fact that we have an M formation as well as a W structure, and both these structures have necklines in more or less the same area. So that actually makes it risky in as far as looking for buying or selling opportunities in this region over here, right? It makes it very risky because, let me just recap. I'm just going to go back to the daily chart again. So here we are on the daily chart. On the daily chart, I spoke about this M structure, right? And I also spoke about how we have a W structure over here, right? The neckline of the W structure is here in this region. The neckline of the M structure is also there. So can you guys see that it'll be risky as far as buying or selling goes in that region? So what is the solution? So here's the solution. I think, okay, before I show you that, let me just go back to the H4 chart. All right, so here's the solution. Because we have an M formation as well as a W formation, the best thing to do, I think, is to wait for, okay, these two lines are their necklines. The best thing to do is to wait for price to either close above the two structures and then come back to this one to retest it, and then that's where you would look for further buying opportunities, or wait for price to actually close below these two structures, and then wait for it to go back to the structure to retest it, and then look for further selling opportunities, right? But for now, buying or selling would be risky, especially if you are executing your trades on the H4 chart, right? But as I said, the H4 chart is now in a downtrend. However, the daily chart is sorry, the H4 chart is in an uptrend, but the daily chart is in a downtrend. And I would say that the this M structure actually is stronger than this W structure. And the reason why I say so is because not only do we have that M structure here with a neckline there, we also have that huge head and shoulders pattern on the daily or weekly chart, which also has a neckline in the same area. and I said that we should be looking for possible selling opportunities on the retest of those two necklines, right? Nonetheless, we also have this structure over here, right? So for now, I would not be looking for any buying or selling opportunities. I would be rather on the safe side, and that is also because over the last week or over the last 8 days or so, we've seen how volatile Volatility 75 has been. It's just been going down and down and down and down and down without giving us any proper channel patterns, so yeah, so that is it, guys, and as far as my analysis goes for Vix75. If you have any further questions, just let me know. Cheers and peace out.